The air buzzed with the whispers of servants, their glowing skin lighting up with gossip about the wild Princess Kira. Yet in the depths of these shining hallways, where no noble foot had ever stepped, a human janitor named Marcus pushed his cleaning cart through the darkness, his worn hands steady despite the shaking in his chest. He had lost everything on distant Earth, his wife, his hope, his place in a universe that had forgotten him. But tonight, as Princess Kira's screams echoed through the palace walls, something ancient stirred in his father's heart. Before we start, subscribe now so you don't miss more incredible stories like this one. Oh, and before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love hearing from you and always read every message. The Zairian royal palace rose like a frozen symphony against the nebulous sky, its towers breathing with the rhythm of ancient biotechnology. Each wall pulsed with veins of silver light, and the floors beneath sang softly with the footsteps of those thought worthy to walk upon them. In the grand nursery, where holographic gardens bloomed in impossible colors, Princess Kira sat alone in the wreckage of another lesson. "Your Highness, please just hold the neural tablet correctly," begged Nurse Yvonne, her forearms shaking as she held out the learning device toward the 7-year-old child. Princess Kira's eyes, twin galaxies of violet fire, blazed with frustration. Her small fists clenched as the alien writing on the tablet wavered and disappeared before her eyes. "I can't," she shrieked, her voice carrying sounds that made the crystal walls vibrate. "The letters won't stay still. They keep moving." Queen Zelera appeared in the doorway, her tall form wrapped in robes that shifted like liquid starlight. Her long skull wore the crown of 7 worlds, and her voice carried the power of 1,000 conquered systems. "Nurse Yvonne," the queen said, her tone sharp as broken ice, "you were dismissed permanently." The nurse's glowing patches flickered in distress. "Your Majesty, perhaps if we tried a different approach." 15 different approaches, Queen Zelera interrupted, her silver eyes narrowing to slits. 15 failures. Princess Kira is heir to the Zairian Empire. She will learn our ways, or she will learn nothing at all. As Nurse Giovanni gathered her things with trembling arms, none of them noticed the human figure in the shadows of the hallway beyond. Marcus Chen pressed himself against the living wall, his brown eyes reflecting the palace's ghostly glow. His janitorial uniform, rough-woven fabric that marked him as the lowest class in this alien hierarchy, seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. In his chest pocket, worn smooth by countless touches, lay a photograph of a small girl with dark hair and laughing eyes, his daughter Emma, lost to him forever, on a world that now existed only in memory. But while the royal court dismissed him as invisible, Marcus' heart recognized something in Princess Kira's cries, a pain older than the stars themselves. 3 rotations later, the palace buzzed with the arrival of Governor the most famous educator in the outer spiral. Her credentials preceded her like a cosmic storm. She had tutored the heirs of 17 dynasties, tamed the wildest noble children across 12 sectors, and never, not once, admitted defeat. The grand hall filled with courtiers, their thin wings rustling with excitement. Glowing tattoos pulsed along their long limbs as they whispered among themselves, placing bets on how long this new teacher would last. "Behold," announced the court herald, his voice amplified by neural implants, "Governor Thalandra of the Crystal Academy, winner over the untamable Prince Vexor of Nebula 7. The governess walked into the hall, her exoskeleton gleaming with ceremonial polish. 6 arms moved in perfect coordination, each one ending in fingers sharp enough to carve stone. Her compound eyes fixed upon Princess Kira with calculating precision. "Your Highness," she said, her voice like grinding gears, "I have brought the neural crown of perfect learning. Never has a student failed to master their lessons while wearing it." Queen Zelera leaned forward on her throne, carved from a single piece of crystallized time. "Proceed, Governor, show us this miracle device." The crown appeared in Thalandra's primary hands, a circle of living metal that pulsed with its own inner light. Neural filaments writhed like silver serpents along its surface. "This device will bypass the child's resistance," the governess explained to the murmuring crowd. "It will force knowledge directly into her consciousness. There will be no more failures, no more excuses." Princess Kira shrank back against her mother's throne, her small hands pressed against her temples. "It hurts just to look at it," she whispered. From the shadows of the great pillars, Marcus watched in horror. His hands gripped his cleaning supplies until his knuckles turned white. He had seen similar devices before on the medical stations where human prisoners were reconditioned. The memory of screams echoed in his mind. No one believed the child would resist such authority, but the silence that followed her next words spread across the chamber like a storm. "I won't wear it," Princess Kira said, her voice small but unwavering. The entire court gasped. Never had anyone, least of all a child, defied Governor Thilandra so directly. The alien educator's compound eyes flared with anger. "Child," she hissed, raising the crown higher, "you will submit to proper education, or you will be declared defective before the entire galaxy." Queen Zalara's face remained a mask of royal composure, but her silver eyes flickered with something deeper. Perhaps recognition, perhaps fear. "Place the crown," she commanded coldly, as Governor Thilandra approached. Princess Kira's violet eyes began to glow more intensely. The air around her shimmered, and several courtiers stepped back instinctively. But before the device could touch her head, a voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Stop." Every head turned toward the source, a human figure stepping out from behind a pillar. His janitor's uniform, a stark contrast to the fancy clothes around him. Marcus Chen walked forward with steady steps, his eyes never leaving Princess Kira's face. Governor Thilandra's voice dripped with contempt. Security removed this contamination from the royal presence. But Marcus continued walking, his voice calm and clear. "Your Highness," he said, addressing not the queen, but the child, "you don't like the way the letters dance, do you?" Princess Kira's eyes widened. No one had ever described it that way before. The way symbols seemed to leap and swirl whenever she tried to read them. They won't hold still," she whispered. Marcus knelt before her, his weathered human hands steady despite the magnitude of what he was doing, addressing royalty without permission, speaking to the heir of an empire that had once tried to exterminate his entire species. Around them, the scandalized gasps from the crowd created a hissing sound that seemed to make the very walls lean inward with anticipation. "My daughter Emma used to say the same thing," he continued, his voice carrying a father's gentle authority that cut through centuries of diplomatic protocol. "She said the letters were trying to escape from the page because they were afraid of being trapped. She said they wanted to fly free and tell stories to the stars." For the first time in months, Princess Kira's expression softened, her violet eyes, so like her human father's, reflecting a wonder that no neural device could ever simulate. "What did you do?" she asked, her small voice carrying the weight of desperate hope. "We made reading into a game," Marcus replied, reaching slowly into his uniform pocket to retrieve something precious, a small hand-carved wooden toy, a butterfly that Emma had made in her last art class. "We chased the letters down and convinced them to stay still by showing them how beautiful stories could be when they worked together. We told them they were brave explorers, not prisoners." The wooden butterfly caught the light from the hall's glowing panels, its simple human craftsmanship a stark contrast to the technological marvel surrounding them. Yet, as Princess Kira reached out to touch it, her fingers glowing with that strange inherited power, the toy seemed to come alive, its carved wings fluttering ever so slightly in her palm. Queen Zalara's voice cut like ice through the moment of connection. "Guards, seize this human at once. How dare he contaminate the royal air with his primitive superstitions?" But as the royal guards moved forward, their exoskeletons gleaming with ceremonial weapons, their neural implants crackling with violent intent, something fundamental shifted in the chamber's atmosphere. Princess Kira stood straighter, her small form suddenly radiating an energy that made every glowing patch in the room flicker in response, creating a cascade of light that rippled outward like waves on a glowing sea. And just when everyone thought the child would break under pressure, something was revealed that no one expected. Princess Kira stepped between Marcus and the approaching guards, her small form suddenly radiating an energy that made the glowing patches of every courtier flicker in response. "Don't touch him," she said, and her voice carried sounds that vibrated through the palace's living structure itself. The guards froze mid-step, their neural implants sparking as they tried to process the conflicting signals. Governor Thilandra's compound eyes widened in shock. "Impossible," she breathed. The child showed signs of, but that bloodline was thought extinct. Marcus felt the weight of 1,000 stares, but he kept his eyes on Princess Kira. "Your Highness," he said softly, "would you like to hear a story about letters that learned to dance together instead of running away?" The child nodded, her power still crackling in the air around them like visible music. Queen Zalara rose from her throne, her towering form casting shadows that seemed to move independently. "Human," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "You dare to approach the royal heir without permission. You dare to speak to her as if she were common." "No, Your Majesty," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the trembling in his chest. "I speak to her as if she were a child who needs understanding instead of force." The words hung in the air like a challenge to the fundamental order of the universe. Around the hall, nobles whispered behind hands and wings, their gossip creating a hissing sound that built like an approaching storm. The kind of storm that changed weather patterns for generations. In the noble galleries, ancient houses that had remained silent for centuries began murmuring among themselves. The House of Crystalline Thought, whose members communicated only in mathematical equations, actually spoke aloud for the first time in living memory. The shadow dancers of the peripheral rim, who existed partially outside normal space-time, stabilized into full reality to better observe the unprecedented scene. This was more than diplomatic scandal. This was a moment that would be studied by alien anthropologists for thousands of years. The instant when a human janitor challenged the educational doctrine of an empire that spanned 17 galaxies. Then Marcus did something that shocked even himself, something that violated every protocol of survival he had learned during the war. He reached into his worn uniform pocket with deliberate slowness, drawing out not just the small battered book he had shown Princess Kira, but something else. A data crystal that caught the light and threw it back in patterns that several aliens recognized with growing amazement. "This belonged to my daughter," he said, his voice carrying across the vast hall with surprising strength. "But before that, it belonged to my wife, Dr. Sarah Chen, lead alien language expert of the First Contact protocols. She spent 15 years developing the translation systems that allowed our species to communicate, before we chose to destroy each other instead." The data crystal pulsed with soft light as he held it up, and the palace's quantum computers immediately began analyzing its contents. What they found sent shockwaves through the assembled crowd. Language algorithms that had been thought lost in the war, translation protocols that could bridge not just language but the fundamental thinking differences between species. The book itself, those yellow pages that had seemed so primitive moments before, began to reveal its true nature. The human letters weren't just symbols, they were embedded with quantum encoding that could adapt to any reader's brain structure. Sarah Chen had spent her life's work creating texts that could teach any mind, no matter how alien, to find the beauty in learning. "She taught me that every story has the power to change a life," Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger as he spoke his wife's words. "But more than that, she taught me that every mind learns differently, and that difference is not a flaw to be corrected. It's a gift to be celebrated." As Princess Kira reached for the book with trembling fingers, her own power responding to the quantum encoding embedded in its pages, something unprecedented began to happen. The alien script that had tormented her for months didn't just become clear, it began to transform, becoming something that belonged to neither human nor Zairian consciousness, but to both. The letters danced across the pages, but now their movement was graceful, purposeful, like a choreographed performance rather than chaotic flight. And as they danced, they began to sing, literally sing with sounds that made the entire palace resonate in sympathy. It wasn't just knowledge, it was legacy. And suddenly silence fell across the crowd. As Princess Kira opened the ancient book, something extraordinary happened. The human letters, crude by Zairian standards, began to glow with the same violet light that came from her eyes. But more than that, the letters themselves started to transform, becoming something that bridged worlds. "I can read it," she whispered, wonder filling her voice. "The letters, they're not afraid anymore." Queen Zalara stepped down from her throne, her silver eyes fixed not on the book, but on Marcus himself. When she spoke, her voice carried a note that hadn't been heard in the palace for 7 years. "Uncertainty." "Human," she said slowly. "What is your full name?" Marcus straightened, meeting her alien gaze with quiet dignity. "Marcus Chen, formerly of the Earth's diplomatic corps, former language specialist for the First Contact protocol, former father." The gasps that rippled through the crowd were like the sound of shattering crystal. Every noble, every guard, every servant suddenly understood what they were witnessing. The Earth's diplomatic corps had been dissolved after the Terran Union war, its members scattered across the galaxy, but before the war, they had been the finest alien language minds in human space. Governor Thalandra's compound eyes clicked as they refocused. You're one of the architects of the Universal Translation Matrix. Your research on cognitive linguistic interfacing was legendary before my world burned. Marcus finished quietly. Yes. Princess Kira looked up from the glowing book, her violet eyes wide with new understanding. You lost a daughter, too. The simple words struck the hall like a thunderbolt. Queen Zalara's composed mask finally cracked, revealing the grief she had hidden for 7 years. Since the day Princess Kira's father, the human ambassador who had won her heart, had died in the war that had torn 2 species apart. You knew, the Queen whispered. You knew why she couldn't learn, why the neural interfaces failed, why every tutor I hired could only see her defiance instead of her heritage. Marcus nodded slowly. She's not fully Zairian, Your Majesty. Her mind processes information through 2 different brain structures. She doesn't need to be fixed. She needs to be understood. Princess Kira closed the book gently, her small hands trembling with newfound power. When she looked up at Governor Thalandra, her voice carried the authority of someone who had finally found her place in the universe. I don't need your crown, she said simply. I need teachers who remember that wisdom is not forced, it's offered. But the final blow came not from words, it came from a name the galaxy had long forgotten. Queen Zilara moved with fluid grace toward Marcus, her robes trailing behind her like liquid starlight. When she spoke, her voice carried across the hall with the power of absolute authority. Courtiers of Zairia, she announced, you stand in the presence of Marcus Chen, widower of Dr. Sarah Chen, architect of the Harmony Protocols, the human who gave his life's work to building bridges between our species before we chose to burn those bridges down. The nobles fell to their knees as one, their glowing patches pulsing in patterns of deep respect and shame. Even Governor Thalandra lowered her compound eyes, her exoskeleton dulling with the realization of her arrogance. Marcus felt the weight of old grief, a new purpose settling on his shoulders like a mantle. Your Majesty, he said quietly, I didn't come here to claim recognition. I came because I heard a child crying, and I couldn't walk away. Not again. Princess Kira approached him then, the ancient book still glowing in her hands. Will you stay? She asked, her voice small and hopeful. Will you teach me about the dancing letters? Marcus knelt again, this time not as a janitor before royalty, but as one grieving parent offering comfort to another lost soul. If your mother will have me, little princess, I have many stories to share. Queen Zalara placed one elegant hand on her daughter's shoulder and extended the other toward Marcus. When he took it, the touch sent ripples of harmony through the palace's living walls, a vibration that hadn't been felt since the war began. Marcus Chen, she said formally, by royal decree, you were appointed as Princess Kira's primary cultural ambassador and educational liaison. Your quarters will be prepared in the noble wing, and your daughter's memory will be honored in the Hall of Lost Bridges. Marcus felt tears he hadn't shed in years gathering in his eyes. Thank you, Your Majesty. As Governor Thalandra gathered her pride and her neural crown to depart in disgrace, Princess Kira called out to her. Governess, the child said, her violet eyes now calm and confident. My father used to say that the best teachers are also the best students. Perhaps you could learn something new, too. The alien educator paused at the threshold, her compound eyes reflecting something that might have been hope. And as Marcus walked away with Princess Kira, the child's laughter echoing through the crystalline halls, no one dared dismiss the power of understanding again, for they finally saw what they had witnessed. 6 months later, the Zairian Royal Academy introduced its first hybrid learning protocol, designed by Marcus Chen and refined by Princess Kira herself. Students from 17 different species traveled across the galaxy to learn the revolutionary teaching methods that honored thinking diversity instead of forcing conformity. The neural crown of perfect learning was donated to the Museum of Educational Failures, where it served as a reminder that knowledge forced upon an unwilling mind creates only rebellion, while knowledge offered with love builds bridges between worlds. Princess Kira, now fluent in 47 galactic languages, became the youngest ambassador in Zairian history. Her first official act was to establish the Lost Children's Protocol, a program to reunite refugees and displaced families across war-torn systems. On the anniversary of the Terran armistice, Queen Zalara stood before the Galactic Council and spoke words that would reshape interstellar relations. We who thought ourselves superior have learned the most valuable lesson from the humblest teacher. A janitor taught a queen that true strength comes not from forcing others to be like us, but from celebrating the beautiful differences that make us all stronger together. Marcus Chen, now wearing the ceremonial robes of a royal educator, kept his old janitor's uniform hanging in his chambers, a reminder that the most profound changes often begin with the smallest acts of compassion. In his desk drawer, beside the faded photograph of Emma, lay a new picture. Princess Kira, laughing as she chased letters across a page, her violet eyes bright with the joy of discovery. In a universe built on conquest and control, sometimes a single act of understanding is enough to shift the stars themselves. For in the end, we are all children trying to make sense of dancing letters, and we all need someone patient enough to help us catch them, one story at a time.